Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about Arena of Valor. Specifically, I want to get into the equipment page and how you can better understand all of these different items so that you can gear your character specifically for fights. You can improve the quality of your character and how they perform in the game. You can kind of build them better individually, and for team fights, you have more uniqueness and ownership over them, and so that you can understand the game better both from your team's perspective and from the enemy team's perspective. Because the game essentially has two ways during the match of developing your character's skills and progressing them. You have the XP system, which will level up your character from 1 to 15 and give them skill points to cast into their first, second, ultimate skills, and will give them more base stats and HP. And then you have the items, and the items are what you purchase with gold. Now every character will have kind of base equipment sets that are automatically generated as kind of suggested sets, but more often than not the suggested sets are not ideal for your character, so you don't necessarily want to rely on these suggested sets. You want to build your own, and you want to really deeply understand what makes these items different, because they all provide different active and passive effects in addition to providing sometimes small and sometimes very large stat bonuses. So you can have wildly different stats by just changing one or two items for your character's armory build setup. So it's really important to understand this. Furthermore, you can actually make small changes to your build mid-game to adjust if your enemy team is providing more difficulty in one particular area or another. So I wanted to make this guide to kind of give you guys a overview so that you can understand and attack this problem of what kind of items should I equip for my character, and you can go into each match with a lot more knowledge than before. So the first two pages here on the left side, just underneath Yorn's picture, are the offensive pages. The attack page is for physical based skills and damage, so this is for primarily marksmen, warriors, and tanks that deal physical damage. And you can see there it's giving a +2 attack damage, which are physical skills and auto attacks. Then you have magic, which is the other side of the offensive coin for people or characters that deal magic damage. So primarily mages, some supports, but also some tanks like Gilder will do magic damage, and so they need ability power, not attack damage, which is for physical types. Then the third page is defense, which obviously just provides a range of defenses. They don't split defenses up into physical and magic, so you're going to have to very carefully read. This one gives armor, which is going to prevent or going to reduce physical damage, while the Medallion of Troy gives you magic defense, which of course defends against magic attacks. The fourth one is very straightforward. They're just boots. These are pretty important. Pretty much every build chooses one boot. You don't want to get more than one boot. I don't believe you can, but one is enough, but also basically a requirement. The last page we've talked about briefly in another video about jungling. This page is usually not allowed. You're not allowed to buy from this page unless you choose the punish talent. You should watch the video that I made about the jungling guide to figure out which particular jungling item you want to go for, but essentially you want to choose the jungling item based on the unique passive that it has. So the unique passive for Soul Reaver is that normal attacks deal 6% of the current HP as magic damage, and then for every 3 damage, or you increase your attack damage by 3 for every monster that you kill up to 15 times. So this is a very offensive minded jungling item. This one is defensive. It gives you more HP with every monster you killed, increases max HP by 70 for every monster killed. And then Loki's Curse will improve your ability power. So this one is for kind of mages who jungle like Zill. So those 3 are kind of separate from everything else. But moving back over into the 4 main items, I want to start first with the movements and explain some of these boots just to get the idea rolling about these different items. So the main effect that you want to read is the unique passive that the item has. That's really going to tell you what it does, and if you don't understand what the unique item or the unique passive is for the item, then it's going to make it hard for you to judge whether it's worthwhile or not. The Sonic boots in this case, they give you movement speed. I believe every boot has the exact same first unique passive of giving you movement speed, so that's kind of the same. What makes these boots unique is that they reduce normal attack damage taken by 15%. So that normal attack damage means auto attack damage, primarily done by marksmen and assassins and some warriors. So if you're facing a team that's mostly warriors or physical assassins or marksmen, these sonic boots might be very, very good. These sonic boots might also be very good for tanks and warriors in general. They're probably not going to be good for mages, because you don't want to stand there and get hit by marksmen in the first place. You want to be out of range of their skills and abilities. It also gives you a small 110 bonus to armor. On the other hand, something like the enchanted boots will give you magic pierce. If you haven't already guessed, this is probably only good for mages that want to deal more damage. So it might not be a good idea for someone like Gilder, because although he is a mage, he's primarily a tank who defends and stuns, so he doesn't really need that magic pierce unless you're going for a very specific build. Another example is the war boots. They give a 25% attack speed bonus. This is not as good for most warriors, although some will use it like Ormar or Lubu, but it's probably very good for marksmen, specifically someone like Yorn. So it might not be as good for someone like Violet, but for Yorn it's going to be very, very good, because the more attack speed Yorn has, the faster he triggers his passive, which means he does more damage faster. So in that case, although the game might suggest a different pair of boots for you, I tend to go more offensive for Yorn, and I like the war boots. So you can figure out what each of these does if you just read them. I don't want to go through all of them. Just keep in mind, specifically for this one, it gives the resistance bonus, and the resistance actually reduces the amount of crowd control effect you experience by 35%. So if you find that you're getting slowed and stunned a lot, or if you see that a team specifically has that you're facing lots of stun, lots of slow, lots of crowd control effects, you might think of getting the Gilded Greaves just specifically for that match. And that's where you're going to want to fine-tune your character a little bit. Another example I want to give you for the attack sets, I can't give you a full set for all characters, but I want to give you an example of some ways that you can differentiate your build depending on what kind of enemies you have. And these kinds of little tweaks are going to make the difference between a more advanced player and a more beginner player who just doesn't make these changes or can't see these changes. So the Spear of Longinus is a pretty good item, and I usually build it on my Yorn, but sometimes I skip building it. The damage and cooldown and armor are nice, but the unique passive is Shatter, which decreases the target's armor by 50 on hit for 5 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. So it decreases their armor by up to 250, which is quite a bit of armor to reduce. If you take a look at some of these defensive items, they don't even offer, some of them offer more, but you can see even the top items don't offer much more than 250, usually about 350. So you can basically totally negate the armor of one of these top level items just by attacking 5 times, and that gets stacked really quickly with Yorn, especially with his passive effect. But this item is only good against characters with high physical defense, because if they stack a lot of physical defense and I don't choose the Spear of Longinus, if I choose a different item like the Clave Sancti, then I'm going to find out that I'm doing much, much less damage to those high stacking physical defense enemies like Arthur or Grak or Ormar, who are stacking up a bunch of defensive items. On the other hand, if I'm facing a team and I see that they don't have any really tanky characters, like for example Zephys or I don't know, Lumbar, then I might consider not taking the Spear of Longinus, because I don't need to pierce through that much physical defense and that much armor. I need to instead, I accepted a friend request, I didn't want to do that, sorry. Instead, you want to choose something that, okay, please stop guys. Instead, you want to choose something that builds on your attack instead of building on pierce if you don't need that physical armor or that kind of damage to high physical defense characters. So those kinds of things, for example, the Muramasa has armor pierce. This is another example of a great item that you could slot in. You could test and see in a casual match whether you get more damage out of the Spear of Longinus or the Muramasa, and then you could make those decisions against high physical defense characters. But it's these kinds of small changes to your item and your equipment loadout that are going to make the difference between your character being good and your character being very good. Another example I have is a build that I've been playing with for Maganga. Recently, or in the past rather, I was using the Orb of the Magi at the beginning because it seems like a really good early game item for mages, because the unique passive, when your hero gains a level, which you do a lot at the early stages of the game, you restore 20% of your HP and mana. That sounds really good, and it also has another effect that stacks ability power and HP. But it turns out that this item just takes too long to purchase because it's expensive, and it also takes takes too long to become good, because every 30 seconds you have to wait and wait, 10 times, that's 300 seconds, that's 5 minutes that you have to wait for the Orb of Magi to build up to its kind of maximum potential. Meanwhile, some of these other items, as soon as you build them, as soon as you buy them with the amount of gold, they immediately give you their full potential. So the Orb of Magi is kind of a smaller benefit that can become stronger later, but if you die, the stacking is going to start again from the beginning, so it kind of rests on your shoulders as well. And I kind of felt that this build, while it was good, these 6 items that you see here at the top, while it was good, it just wasn't doing enough for my character. So I went online and I searched up a different build, and I also tested some in game myself, and I came up with this build that was based on something that I found on the Reddit, and it's a much more defensive build. It includes boots that I didn't have before instead of these gilded ones, and it includes specific defensive items to make the character have more armor in this case. And I found that this suited my playstyle much more. This kept my Maganga alive a lot longer, and it made the games more enjoyable and more effective for me, and I was able to last longer and get more kills because of the changes that I made to his items. So I would definitely encourage you guys, I can't go through all of the items here, but definitely take a look at the last row of items. These are kind of tier 1, tier 1 over here on the left, tier 2 in the middle, and then tier 3. Definitely read through all of the tier 3 items for every single different page to get an understanding of what they do. Reduces the attack speed of nearby enemies by 30%, very strong for defensive characters. And also take advantage and look at some of the later items in the second tier, because I think a lot of players ignore this second tier of items for magic, defense, and attack, but some of these are actually really strong, like Virtue's Necklace for someone like Alice to give her lots of mana regen, or Vlad's Impaler to give you some magic lifesteal, or Staff of Null, which gives you 40% magic pierce. Some of these items are cheaper than the tier 3 items, but they might actually end up giving your character more of an effect and more of an impact early on. You can also consider altering your build to include more kind of inexpensive items, cheaper items, so that your character can get stronger faster to dominate the early game. An example of this would be if you chose a defensive character, for example Arthur, who is primarily there to harass the enemy and kind of roam around supporting different characters. If you got something like the Knight's Plate, which when you take damage it reduces the attacker's attack speed by 30, this is a very inexpensive item. It's less than half, it's almost a third of the cost of some of these tier 3 items, but the impact that this item has can be drastic on early team fights when you're level 4, 5, or 6. So you could consider getting your Sonic boots and then going ahead and building that Knight's plate, or going ahead and building another cheaper tier 2 item and using that to initiate and dominate the early to mid game without having to invest more heavily in some of these more expensive items. Keep in mind that when you get to the end game and you have lots of excess gold, if the game does get to that point, you can always sell certain items to purchase new items. Just keep in mind you shouldn't sell an item until you have enough gold for the other item that you want to buy, because you don't want to be without an item slot in the end game. For example, some people like to build up their 6 items, and then if the game is going really long, they like to switch out one of their end game items for Ancestral Glory, because it revives you when you die with 40% HP. So that's kind of like a last ditch effort to win the game if you just need that one extra bit of HP but you happen to have died. And it also has the surprise factor if the enemy's not checking. Of course, during the game you can always go back and see, and you can pull up the screen live to see what your team has equipped and what the enemy team has equipped. So the other side of learning the items is actually learning to recognize what the enemy might be building. So if I was playing this game right now and we were still in the game, I would notice that, you know, their Fennec, Ness, he's building a lot of attack, but he's also got resistance. So my crowd control is not going to work as effectively on him as I would like. On the other hand, the Lumbar has built Mantle of Ra and Sonic Boots, so he's going to deal some continuous damage to me, and he's also going to take less damage from my auto attacks if I were, you know, Violet or Arthur or something like that. So you can keep in mind these things, and you can notice patterns, and you can also see when specific enemies are building for specific items, and then you can use that to either counter them with other specific items or to anticipate the changes to their character based on the equipment that they've chosen, so that you're not surprised by them in battle. In the late game, when the match goes, you know, 20-30 minutes, I always like to check and see who has built the ancestral glory, so I don't get caught off guard by someone building an item that's going to revive them after I thought I've killed them and potentially backstab me in the middle of, you know, a team fight. So I hope that this guide and introduction to the equipment page and all of the different items that you can equip on your character for your build has been helpful. Let me know if you have any other suggestions or if you have any other questions about this specifically. I don't have kind of tested and tried and true builds for any character because I am still new to the game. I'm only about 250 matches in, but I have a pretty good idea, so I can give you some tips if you want to know about a specific hero. So comment below if you have those kinds of questions. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Thank you to my fan Bizzle for this awesome New Year's / Christmas skin gift for Yorn. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.